Oh, hello there. Bose here. I had the opportunity to interview some of the devs at Firaxis and ask them some questions in regards to Civilization 7. Now, I was joined by both Ed Beach and Carl the Barbarian a little bit ago and asked them very, very important questions, such as balancing the AI in Civ 7 and obviously the most important question of them all, can we still pet the dog? Now, I only had a limited amount of time to ask a lot of questions, so I tried to get as many out that I thought were important as possible, but obviously there are still some to be asked and hopefully will be answered in the next dev streams. Regardless, I hope you all enjoy,
All right,
and
I'm
here's
ready.
the interview. All right. Well, good morning to both of you. Thanks for joining me for
Good morning.
asking some questions on Civ 7 and your thoughts and everything on it.
Yeah.
I split it into two parts. I've got tougher questions and some easier questions. So what do you guys wanna start with today?
Whatever makes sense for you.
Sure.
Whatever makes sense. Okay. Well, we'll start with some. I'll give a one easy question and then we'll jump right into the hard questions. That way, we can ease into it. I guess the first easy question that I have in regards to Civ 7 is you guys talk a lot about the 3-3-3 rule when moving into new. Is it 3-3-3 or is it 33-33-33 rule? Whatever.
Probably 33, 33,
Okay.
30.
Yeah, when you're moving into a new iteration of the franchise, was there anything in particular in Civ 7 that you would have loved to either see from previous games that may have been removed, or anything that pains you to be removed? It doesn't necessarily have to be Civ 7. Like maybe there was something from 5 to 6, or so on and so forth.
Sure. I know one thing for
Go for
me
it.
was was the way that we do great people.
Mm-hmm.
As a content designer, great people are such an amazing content lever.
Yeah.
There's so many abilities for civs and leaders in Civ 6 to interact with that system, and so many great abilities on the great people. And so having that as a global thing to tie into
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of fun. That said, I love the way that we're handling great people this time, where it's unique to each civilization. We're
Right.
able to get a lot more history for that civ in there as a result. We're able to focus on those individual great people and what makes them special and how those people make that civilization special. So I think we've gained a lot, but at the same time, I felt that loss.
Yeah,
And
I
I
can see
think
that.
one thing you'll see the specific ties to those specific people is with some of the stories coming out of our narrative system.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So the narrative team has actually gone through and looked at every single great person, whether it's Greek philosophers or something else, and tried to come up with something cool from the story of their life, to put in the game. So that's amazing that we get to add that. But I kind of like that global competition for them as well.
Yeah, I can imagine that, especially, the just seeing, you have like 50 great points per turn for one, and then everyone only has like 2 to 3, and then of course there's also the inevitable, getting sniped when you want Einstein.
Right.
That
Yeah.
feeling is always the worst.
Very similar to the Wonder Race in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. That actually kind of turns into, I have another question here in regarding to narrative events. And I mentioned, on the scale of when it comes to narrative events, we saw some of them on the live stream that were particular to Augustus. And as you said just now, that you went through like a lot of the great people and created narrative events based off of their history. This is going to be, you may not know the answer to this, but do you happen to know off of the top of your head how many narrative events are in the game? And to go off of that as well, how hard was it to come up with the foundation of these events? The payoffs and the trade-offs, and you said they're also based off of historical events, or at least loosely based off of the events surrounding those people.
So I can't give you an exact number. I did
Mm-hmm.
know an exact number at one point, but then it was like,
It
you
grew.
know, it
Yeah.
grew, but then we're also like, these aren't working so well, so we're going to cut a few here. And
Mm-hmm.
we're sort of in bug fixing on the project right now. And if there's some that just really are not working out, a few of
Mm-hmm.
them are going to cut for those reasons. But we targeted well over 1,000.
Oh yeah.
It was very ambitious. Um, and the narrative team was looking at all the different parts of the game. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, how many are going to be tied to each leader? How many are going to be tied to each civ?
Mhm.
How many are going to be tied to those special, unique civilians or great people?
How many are generic?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
what's really cool about the narrative system that hasn't gone out in any of our correspondence so far is it's got a really weird foundation. It
Mm-hmm.
actually takes the same code that we used for the Civ 6 gossip system,
Oh,
where
okay.
all those different messages about what's going on in the game
Mm-hmm.
were sort of overwhelming the user. And we're like, I'm
Right.
not sure that's really working. in our favor. It's a little bit too much signal and not enough noise to our players.
Uh-huh.
But we found that the system that was underlying that was looking for things happening out in the game world and um, recording those was a great foundation for the narrative system
Mm.
because we could write stories that are based on like how many times has this river flooded or
Hmm.
what happens when this river floods and this is the leader of your civilization and you're playing as so and so. It's got a really interesting set of combination of requirements from the events that have happened out in the world that trigger each of the stories. And so that makes it a very um, rich system. Some of the narrative events are very hard to trigger and they only
Hmm.
happen in a very particular instance, but that's very cool that the system can recognize that that has just happened in
Yeah.
your game world. So that's one of the things I really like about that system.
Yeah, and in terms of your part of the question about the foundation for it and then and iterating on it, we went through a lot of different sort of variations on the system first as it was getting up and running, and we had, sort of test stories, and
Hmm.
then proceeding from there, trying to add more depth, more flavor, and then balancing the rewards out. That was a very long process that went through a lot of different changes,
Yeah.
and um, you, some of the stories are very easy to trigger and we'll see them come up more often, and those, we've hit a lot, and some of them are, like you said, how many times a river floods is like a much more niche case,
Yeah.
and there are some that have more niche trigger conditions that don't come up as often, and so those are much more rare stories to see, and trying to fine tune that has definitely been a process.
No, I can imagine so. That's really interesting that you're talking about the using the gossip system and how it could be overwhelming. Because I just remember, the only times I really used it was a really good example was during my All Wonders videos when I was playing as China and trying to build every single wonder on Deity, and and the only time I used it was really being, someone has started working on a wonder, and I was like, oh, that's actually really useful to know. And because
Mhm.
otherwise I would just, click, 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 trying to get through it all as fast as possible.
I expect to see a similar video from you with Hatchets at Egypt.
Yeah, that's it's on my list. It's on my list of things I want to do. Okay, I guess I can start to get some of the harder questions here, and I guess it works a little bit here. Is I know when it came to single player AI, and I know you guys have been asked multiple questions about this quite a bit. I know that you mentioned, the AI team itself has, I don't know if it was doubled in size. I'm not sure the exact quote, but it was, substantially larger than it has ever been. Um, I think one of the single biggest, single player, I don't know if you want to call them complaints in Deity AI is how the AI actually works. Do you think the larger scale of the AI team, helped in making sure that when you jump up the difficulties, it's not necessarily about just giving the AI, I guess not necessarily cheats, but just multipliers, so that way they keep up with you for the rest of the game instead of keeping the same just AI as it was on Prince before. Is the smaller changes, like getting rid of builders and settlers, does that help? So that way the AI doesn't necessarily have to escort them, and when it comes to decision making, or also on the other side of it, when you're adding things like legacy bonuses, going through each of the age, does that end up making it more complicated for the AI because they have more things to choose from now? What can you extrapolate on that a little bit more?
So I'll start out with the answer there. And it's really hard for us to measure the exact size of our
Sure,
AI
yeah,
team
yeah.
because what I really like about what we're doing now is we have designers from all the different areas of the game, whether it's economics, military, whatever. We have sort of this cross-disciplinary AI team
Hmm.
that meets twice a month, and we come up with how's the game playing right now?
Right.
Where's the AI doing well? Where is the AI weak right now? We come up with sort of a punch list of things that we want to see addressed in the AI as quickly as we
Uh-huh.
can, hopefully before the next meeting. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get it there. But we've had sort of a across the design team focus
Okay.
on AI being just a really important part of delivering a quality experience with the game. And I feel like, I started my very first job at Firaxis was Civ 5 AI lead.
Yeah.
So I have a tremendous kind of respect for how hard the AI problem is.
Yeah.
Um, the worst problem that I ever had on AI was trying to get a full army of units to the target.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
specifically, your question about do commanders help things out? absolutely they do, just because that problem has gotten easier, and that was
Right.
pretty much about as tricky a problem as we had in AI development for Civ 5 and Civ 6. But I think your question about legacy paths is a good one as well, because we now have, if you look at legacy paths as sort of like objectives or ways to get towards victories, um, we have four of those in each age, 3 ages. That's 12 different sort of pathways to victory or pathways towards strong progress in the game that the AI has to be
Yeah.
aware of. So we've been trying to make those legacy paths line up with just what's a really good way to play the game in as strong a fashion as possible. So like
Yeah.
building wonders is usually a pretty good thing to do in the game, or putting down a lot of settlements is a really good thing in the game. And so you
Mhm.
see that those are some of the legacy paths right away in Antiquity, just to get the AI off to a good start, but also to help them progress down the legacy paths. Some of the legacy paths get a little bit, I wouldn't say weirder, but maybe more specific as we get into the other ages, and we haven't
Yeah.
talked about them yet. And so it has taken a little bit of our time to make sure that the AI knows how to play those other legacy paths well, as in addition.
Yeah. And you asked about the simplification of some of our things like the removal of builders, and you mentioned commanders, touched on commander and AI use there. I think that those are all really good examples of ways that the changes in the core gameplay for Civ 7 has also made it easier for the AI.
Yeah.
There's a constant debate in the community about when to build a builder, how many builders to build. I mean, the answer is
Yeah.
really like all of them, right?
All of them.
It's
Yeah, all of the
constant.
time.
And how do you balance that against your need to build units, your need to build wonders?
Hmm.
It is just an item that is constantly sinking your production queues. And by removing that, that's one less thing for them to have to worry about. Right now, they are able to better uh, analyze whether it should be time to build a wonder, build a building, build a settler, build a military unit,
Yeah.
because that need for the constant flow of builders is no longer there. And the same is true for not just moving units across a landmass to a target with commanders, but also handling them in battle.
Yeah.
Um, Positioning of units is important, and that gets infinitely more complex when those units have promotions themselves. And positioning that one unit that has 4 or 5 promotions in the right spot so that it's in a good place to fight, but also not at risk of dying and being lost and all those
Yeah.
promotions going away. That was very tricky. Now, with the commander having the promotions and giving them to all the other units, it makes it much easier for the AI to handle where to put units and how to use those units, because all of those units are benefiting from the promotions that the commander has.
Yeah, that makes sense. And especially considering how, in previous iterations, a lot of the times AI will just flood their units into your cities with kind of no care on regards of where it's at. They're just going to run them into your cities over and over again. And when you only have to worry about a commander, for example, having the XP and being the one that you need to carefully position. I mean, you still have to position the units,
Yeah.
when you're sieging and trying to figure it out. But when they really only have to worry about the commander, it kind of makes it a little bit easier on that aspect too. That makes a lot of sense. Um, another question too that is maybe not necessarily harder to answer, but Civ isn't the only strategy game that has this problem. You guys have talked about it quite a bit. Is the slog that comes with the late game, and your attempts to fix it, or at least alleviate that slog a little bit. Splitting of the 3 ages, the rubber band mechanic that comes up when you're switching over to the new era, as well as just changing how things are micromanaged, as we mentioned, to hopefully like alleviate this grind. Is there anything that you can extrapolate more on, especially as you're moving into the final era? You haven't talked about it yet at this point, but that maybe will help alleviate, or at least, just help alleviate a little bit more without going too much into modern era that you guys haven't talked about yet.
Sure, yeah. So we as you mentioned, we do have some rubber banding that happens on the age transition. We
Hmm.
do bring yields back closer together a little bit, but you keep everything that you had.
Yeah.
So when you're moving into a new age, you might have yields reduced somehow. We've not gotten into all the details about how that is working, but if you were an elite in science, you're still going to be an elite in exploration.
Right.
Um, and you are starting at the beginning of a new tech tree, at the beginning of a new civic tree. Everyone's going from the same point, so that's helping right there. And then everyone's picking from legacy paths.
Right.
You get the rewards that you had for the legacies that you pursued from the previous age, and those are giving you all different kinds of bonuses, but those are based on your progress in that age. So if you hit a bunch of legacy paths and have a bunch of points, you'll have more things to spend on. That'll give you more bonuses going into the new age, versus somebody who maybe didn't hit as many of those things will have fewer points to spend. At the same time, we have new mechanics in each age that do help with the alleviating the grinding and the micromanagement. So as an example, one thing that we have not officially revealed yet, but I'll mention now, is that we do have a new commander type in each age. We're not going into the specifics on them,
Yeah.
but there is a new one in each age that will help with the military gameplay as you progress forward.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's cool.
Anything to add to that?
And I think the other thing to keep in mind is we have talked a little bit about how overbuilding works, how the fact that each tile on the map, each of your urban tiles has slots for 2 buildings, but that the buildings from the previous age drop off in power as you get into the new age, and you want to replace them in those good adjacency bonus slots with buildings from the new age that are getting full power of the latest and greatest sort of advances in what buildings are able to give you with the adjacency bonuses for the new age. So you're ending up sort of creating a new layer on top of your city of additional buildings.
Yep.
Right.
And the other ones just sort of go away, but you don't mind that because they weren't doing a whole lot for you in this age anyways. And so we're just reducing the number of things that you're concerned with in the map. You don't have to worry about that granary that you built at the beginning of time getting knocked out by a flood and you have to repair it or something like that, because there are new buildings that are keeping your focus.
Cool. Okay, that's good. That's good to hear that. Another one here too is, sorry, I've got some. We told you these are some tougher questions, I guess. At least for me, one of the main concerns that I have, especially as the genre of the 4X genre is starting to expand more, is there is quite a bit of content and so many choices that are given to a player that often, especially with newer games, the paradox of choice tends to come around, where you're getting so much choice that you become paralyzed in what to choose, and you don't know who to choose, and you kind of just click wherever you want to go. Has this been, I'm sure it was thought about at some point as you were expanding into, okay, we're going to be able to switch civs throughout the eras. And do you think in what ways do you think that you guys at Firaxis were able to at least mitigate this issue of being paralyzed of, I don't know who to choose because there's so many different civs to choose from into coming into the next stage?
Absolutely, it did. And you can imagine we've talked a lot about our Civ unlock system, where based on either what leader you've chosen or what civilization you've chosen or what's happened in your gameplay, that helps determine which Civ choices are available to you in the next stage. Well, we didn't have that at the beginning of development.
Okay.
So beginning of development, it was very free form, and we were trying to figure out how this was going to work. But that meant that when you got to an age transition, you had a lot of choices. And the combinatorics of just sort of who you were choosing and who your opponents were choosing, we saw right away that was overwhelming and confusing. And I mean, it unlocks thousands and thousands of possible paths through the game, but is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
Right.
So we poked at that. We had feedback on that, and we pretty quickly came to the realization that some kind of structure there was going to be helpful, both in terms of immersion, in terms of who I am, in terms of history. How is this going to work so it feels more like you're starting as one people and just following their evolution through history. So we added the Civ Unlock system, started constraining the choices that way, and everything felt a lot better. So I think that's absolutely a case where too much choice, not only personally in terms of where you were going, but when the AI has all those choices too, and it's all wandering all over the place, it just led to a little too much confusion in terms of what's happening in this game world, and bringing some structure to it really helped.
Yep.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that definitely helping quite a bit, because as you said, at some point, even if you only have like a small amount of civs and leaders, at some point the combinations just start to become too endless, And so that's adding structure definitely will help with that. And I guess piggybacking on top of that choice aspect is balancing. It's really hard as it is initially. I mean, I know Carl's talked with us about, you only have a finite amount of time in development when you're balancing, and then literally within the first hour of release, you're getting millions and millions of hours played, and you're getting all of this additional, testing that you never got to do during the development team. Now with the introduction of, so many civs and the abilities of switching into the new age, how difficult was the balance process? Obviously, it's probably not even finished yet, but how difficult was it maybe compared to previous iterations? And what was the process of this? Was it just kind of similar to how it was in the past, or did you have to take a new approach because you're switching to the age transitions?
It was incredibly more difficult.
Yeah.
So looking at the past, we've had very targeted things that we're able to test when you're playing as Gorgo Grease. That's the only thing you have to worry about. You're not adding any different combinations there. You have then Pericles Grease, but that's one switch. It's not every leader. And now that we are decoupling civs and leaders, and you can play as any leader with any civ, and we have the opportunity of civs going into different civ paths as you progress through a campaign, that has made it indescribably more complex.
Yeah.
So we're doing as much as we can to balance the game and to make it as good as we possibly can. But frankly, the game will be unbalanced in certain ways at launch. And we're excited actually to see the different crazy things that the community is going to do with all of these different combinations and go, oh, if I take this leader and this civ, and then that transitions into this civ, and I get to add those abilities together, seeing the different things that the community is going to find that we didn't think of or didn't see ourselves, I think is going to be a lot of fun. But it has definitely been a big challenge.
I think the one thing that is easier, there is at least one thing that's easier, is the fact that in the past it was very hard to balance a early game civ against a late game civ versus the middle game civs. Everyone had their sort of moment in the sun where they, had all their bonuses working and their unique unit came online, and so you knew that this, Sumeria was just going to be great right out of the gate.
Right.
And how to balance early game Sumeria against somebody like a Canada or Sweden who has all their bonuses late in the game, that was just
challenging.
A very weird problem to try to grapple with. And now where all the civs are coming online at the same time for a particular age. So we balance them against each other, and that's a limited set compared to the 50, 60 civs we had to balance last time as well. So there are some ways that the balance problem is easier. It's just that the stacking and layering of the different things leads to a huge, space for players to explore and for us to try to figure out whether or not we're letting things get out of hand in one particular pathway where you stack like all the science bonuses together.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, especially now that you mentioned when it comes to, late game versus early game, it's how are you going to, that's so difficult to balance, thinking about, how are you going to balance Mansa Musa versus, Alex, for example, in Civ 6. Right. There's a vast difference there in between the two. That's understandable. How much time do we have here? Sorry.
It sounds like production has 1 minute left.
1 minute left. Okay. With the last one there, I have a really easy question then for you. First of all, can we pet the dog? And second, if not, when?
So the scout has gotten a lot of attention from our team, and if you look at what we're doing with units and buildings, or whatever, we're doing a lot of. So I think if you look at the video from the Nintendo Direct event where we revealed some new content. The scout in there is a very unique scout that doesn't even have a dog.
I saw that, yeah.
So petting the dog, we know that's from Big Feature, but we're going to actually have to figure out how to pet multiple animals.
Oh,
so
okay.
Not something that we're all squared up for launch, but we'll figure that problem out.
That's very important questions to answer, so. All right, well, I guess that'll go ahead and do that for me here. Thank you so much for joining me and answering these questions. I know some of them were a little more difficult than others, but I appreciate all the feedback and candor that you guys gave for those.
Thanks for having us, boesthius.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.